Welcome to Inclusion Influencers, brought to you by the National Alliance for Accessible Golf. Our goal with these interviews is to highlight the people and organizations in the game of golf that are making a difference in the lives of individuals with disabilities. This includes golfers out there leading the way by showing others what is possible, organizations that dedicate resources and facilities to bring people into the game, and others that support, educate, inform, and perhaps inspire you to learn more and get yourself and others involved. Golf is truly a game for all abilities. Our May-June inclusion influencer is Tom Houston, who was paralyzed below the waist in 1980 at a time when the idea of a wheelchair golfer, as it might have been referred to, barely existed. Now seated golfers are playing all over the world, and I'm confident Tom would simply and rightfully just call himself a golfer. I met Tom when I was with the National Golf Course Owners Association. I was pleased to see he was also one of our organization's original advisory board members. Tom, you fundamentally reshaped access and opportunity in the game of golf, and I'm looking forward to discussing this journey with you, starting at the very beginning. Tom, how are you today?
Great, thanks.
How is life? What part of the country are you in right now, Tom? Florida. Very nice.
Florida.
So, Tom, tell me a little bit about yourself before 1980, and then what happened in 1980, if you care to share that since you own this path and towards the game of golf. And I understand you did not play golf before your injury, so just a little bit of background on that, if you might, and then we'll get into some pivotal moments in your golfing career.
Well, I was a pipe fitter welder by trade. I served an apprenticeship coming right out of high school. I worked for a large construction company, working in their pipe fabrication plant for about 4 years. Moved out into the field, worked my way up to become a field superintendent in charge of building things like oil refineries and chemical plants. I worked in their oil and chemical division. And I was on a scaffolding one day in Wheatland, Wyoming. 1980, the scaffold collapsed. I fell about 40 feet, had a T12 spinal cord injury, left me paralyzed somewhere below this between nipple and belly button area.
Interesting. So, again, you weren't playing golf before then. So after that injury, and I know that you really started playing with a next level sort of commitment around the 1989 timeframe, and we're going to talk about it in just a second because you've had the opportunity to play with some pretty well-known people in the game of golf. But after your injury and before golf, where was your mindset? I may ask that question. At what point between the accident and 1989 did something click with you, or did you migrate or think that golf may be something that would really dominate your existence for your life?
Well, because I wasn't a golfer, golf never played any role in any of my thought process up until the time I stepped on a golf course, which was in July of 1989. What happens is when something like this dramatic happens to somebody, and I was 40 years old, I was a high school educated person, but had my pipe fitter apprenticeship as an education process. But at 40 years old, Voc Rehab didn't know where to put somebody like me. I had lots of experience doing construction work, not going to do that from my old 50-pound push wheelchair. So the first couple of years you spend just trying to get your feet back on the ground. You have to learn to dress yourself, feed yourself, get in and out of bed, get in and out of the bathtub, whatever. Everything's different. It's not the same anymore. You really spend a few years just trying to get yourself organized, and then they give you medication, and that keeps you kind of doped out. And so a couple of years went by before I figured out I had to go do something. Voc Rehab was going to find me a job, a minimum wage job somewhere. At age 40, I was making about $50,000 a year in 1980. And now they want me to take a minimum wage job at $1.75 an hour at Goodwill or something. That wasn't going to work. So I had my experience in the pipe fabrication shop. My oldest son was out of school. I had some contacts in that business. We started a little pipe fabrication business. I found it very difficult to do anything functionally from a push wheelchair. My hands were always busy moving me from here to there and couldn't get close enough to anything. So all of that became really difficult to really function. And a little company came up for sale that built recliners on wheelchairs that they didn't want anymore at a price. And I bought this little company, had a little machinery and a name. And so that's where I started into getting things organized to work on wheelchairs of different kinds with different purposes. I built recliners for pressure relief. I built tilt and space seats for pressure relief that went on somebody else's wheelchair. Along the way, because of all the frustration of my manual chair not getting me where I needed to go to be functional, I started working on this stand-up wheelchair. And all of my experience about trying to function in the environment before the ADA, no curb cuts, no anything, too too big of a chair to go down aisleways, to get in bathroom doors, to do anything. So I never went anywhere. I would send somebody else because after you went through all the trouble to get there, you couldn't get the job done. So then I'd say, well, while you're out, get this for me, get that for me, get something else for me. Meanwhile, I began work on the high rider. It went through a 5-year phase through 3 different prototypes, if you will, before we got to the final stage of the prototype at the end of 5 years. And it was really designed about trying to help people not experience what I did, not having any kind of employment opportunities. If something happens to you and you have skills, you have a tool that would help you use those skills and just go on with your life if you could. So the whole thought process in this chair was about to adapt me to the environment, because I recognized that right away the environment was never going to adapt itself to fit the needs of about 1 million people that use a wheelchair full time. So
That's really interesting.
that's an impossible task. And we see that today, 35, 40 years after the ADA, there's still a multitude of places that are inaccessible. They're never going to be accessible. So
Yep, we're going to get into that. So, the most interesting thing about that story to me is what you just said there, which is when you developed the high rider to elevate you into a more of a prototypical standing position, correct?
right, sure.
At that time in your life, not related to golf at all, not access to a golf
No,
course. It was just basically barrier-free environment so you could function much more like a individual without a disability would function, with the ability to stand up, reach, grab things without being totally associated with moving your vehicle around
that's
or
correct.
not being able to get into places.
I built a skid plate under the bottom of it because there weren't curb cuts. I could just drive right off the curb. It'd drop on the skid plate, slide down the curb, and away I'd go. So you did things that would help me get through the existing environment as I saw it and experienced it every day.
And there
And
was not a vehicle around at that time that did that, correct? I mean, or
no,
anything. Yeah.
no, I got patents on this. There was nobody. I was way before Permobile came along or anybody else. So uh,
Answered my next question because I was going to kind of biggest challenges were at that part of your life before golf, and you already got into them because as this was going on, obviously in the early 90s, they were working through the process of getting the Americans with Disabilities Act enacted. It
I
would,
spent 6 months in Washington in late '89 and early 1990 with Tom Harkin and Ted Kennedy, Senate subcommittee hearings about the ADA. I was there for that process, had lots of input, and my input was not necessarily all geared toward just my disability. I was also a business owner and realized that some of the things that you're going to put in here are going to affect businesses financially and other ways that may or may not be able to afford that. So there's always compromise in things, which is going to take me to where we went to with golf in a little bit. But you have to think about it has to work for everybody or it doesn't work at all. If it's only a one-sided thing, nothing works one-sided. So everybody that's involved has to be there. So I participated in that, was there at the signing at the end of the ADA, worked on the President's Committee of Employment of Persons with Disabilities, got an award from President Bush that they used to give out in those days. People would submit your name for this award. They called it the Distinguished Disabled American of the Year Award.
hey,
And I got that from President Bush. We were actually going to play golf together at Kennebunkport. And the Gulf War broke out and the golf thing never happened. But I met him on several occasions. Invited back to Washington to celebrate the first anniversary of the ADA because of the participation that I had in there. And so all of that happened prior to all of this. So I had some incoming knowledge about the ADA document, what was in it, and what was going on there. So I had some background there before the golf thing ever really began to develop.
yeah, we'll talk for sure about communications, two sides of the story, a solution that works, everyone, that's would be the goal. But and I'm sure you've heard this term. It's pretty easy to understand, especially with your development of the high rider and what that ultimately evolved into as well. that you've been called the Wright brother of adaptive golf. I'm not sure when the last time you heard that, but I caught that when I was doing a little more research on you. At some point, you were working on this employment aspect of, or just normal participation in society, which you were focused with the ADA. At some point in there, golf must have popped into your mind somehow because you wouldn't be called the Wright brother of adaptive golf if you didn't start playing golf at some point. And so
Well,
as you began modifying equipment, did the light bulb go off, or what was the catalyst that had you thinking, okay, on a golf course, obviously you're got an engineering kind of type of background, real smart guy. I measure once, cut five times kind of guy. I'm terrible. I measure one time and I cut up so many pieces of lumber to make something work. But obviously, there's a lot of technical details involved with these vehicles that you're creating, especially when it comes to golf course and size. Those things very people are very familiar with now, but would not have been familiar when you first got into this. So, we're transitioning into playing golf and in the way you play golf, kind of going on, and what drove you that direction? How did that go for you that first
oh,
trip? I have to ask.
that was just had to fight your way, and there was no ADA, so you couldn't threaten them with anything. Not that that's a good way to do things, but you had no recourse. You could just say, "Well, okay, down the road." That was almost everywhere. It was very difficult. So, uh, how I got started was when you're in a wheelchair and you adapt your living environment to your wheelchair. If people want to see you, they have to come to your house because it's all fixed up. You can get in the doors, you can do all that stuff. You can't go visit people because they got a step going in the house or they got furniture and stuff all over, and a wheelchair just doesn't fit in other people's environment. So, pretty much, I'm like everybody in that sense. I'm home on the weekends, and my kids come over one day, I've grown up in teens, early 20s, and say, "Come on, Dad, let's come play golf with us." I said, "You guys are nuts. I can't play golf." They said, "You do everything else. I don't know why you couldn't play golf." So I lived out in the country, but my neighbor down the road a little bit was a golfer. I went over and asked him if I could borrow his golf clubs for a day. We went to a little executive 9-hole golf course and went in my high rider, went out there and beat the ball around. I think I kept score. I think it was 9 holes, 65 or something like that. And I did hit the ball every once in a while. The first 10 times I missed it, but I did hit it every once in a while. But the chair was designed originally with a 1-inch wide tire on the back as a caster wheel, a semi-soft rubber or semi-hard rubber. And as I went over the greens, I was leaving a little track in the green. And the superintendent came out there on the first day and said, "It's a good idea, and I like having you here, but you're going to have to do something about those tires because the groove in the green isn't going to work." Well, I know nothing about golf. I absolutely know nothing. And I agree with him. That's not good to leave grooves anywhere. So went and put some wider tires on the back, which was the only real adaptation I made to begin with. Still using just the 3-inch tires in the front, as the chair was designed originally, just the small tires. And I went back and played one more time, and that was good, no problem. And then we got real busy. I was working with a company in Buffalo to license the right to manufacture this chair. They were all set to do it. They had a plant in Puerto Rico. And by the time we worked through all the details in December, we flew to Puerto Rico to look all that over and talk about all the things that needed to happen. And he lived at Dorado Beach right next to Chichi Rodriguez, friends with Chichi. And the seniors and ladies were having a little year-end tournament there. Chichi thought it'd be a good idea, knowing I played a couple rounds of golf, to got me in the Pro-Am. First day I played with Charles Cootie. The next day I played with Sherry Turner. And I just saw Charles Cootie's grandson playing the other day on the tour. And while I was there, a person approached me and introduced himself, and he said, "I'm representing the Royal Caribbean. I'm here scouting this tournament. We're set to have our inaugural senior golf tournament at Key Biscayne in Florida in January, and we'd love to have you come and participate in our Pro-Am." And I said, "Wow, you can see I don't play golf very well. You got about 5 rounds of golf under my belt. Still know not much about the rules or etiquette, really fresh." And he said, "It's all about raising money for charity. Our charity is the Miami Project, which is a research project to grow the spinal cord back together." And all the Miami Dolphins were involved in that. Nick Bonaconte's son having a broken neck, of course, from playing football. So all these Miami Dolphins participated in this pro-am. And so I played with those guys. Bob Greasy, actually, on one of the days I played with Bob Greasy on the team. But anyway, that's how all of that began. And that's, of course, where I got to play with Mr. Palmer and Trevino and Player. Now, the first time was pretty scary because I knew nothing about this game, but I'm sitting there, and the first night they have this big party, and it's a drawing party. I don't have a clue what a drawing party is. What it is all the pro-am participants have a name in a bowl over here, and all the pros over here, and they draw them and pair them up. Well, my name never came up. I don't figure that out. But next day, I'm getting ready to go. I'm out there. Well, I'm playing with the owner of the Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines, who gets to pick whoever he wants to play with. He's not part of the drawing party. So now I'm on the tee box with the owner of the Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines and Arnold Palmer, and I've played about 5 games of golf in my life and still don't know much about the game or anything, but there I am. And Mr. Palmer could see right away I wasn't a golfer yet. He held my club or whatever that was. And rather than try to teach me how to swing or give me any tips at all, he would have me get up to the tee and he'd say, swing your golf club. I'd swing the club and he'd say, okay, well, he'd tee the ball up and say, okay, again. So he was watching where my club went and seeing if he could tee the ball up in the path and hope I could swing twice the same way.
Yep.
And he did that all day. He teed the ball up for me every day.
Phenomenal.
And then at the end of the round, we had an interview with PN, and they asked Mr. Palmer what it was like to play with a guy in a wheelchair. And he said, I think it's great. See people like that here playing. He said, I think it's wonderful. He said, hopefully we'll have more people like that someday. So,
well, did you have an idea at the time? You think you mentioned your round with Arnold Palmer was in 1989. Did you have any idea at the time beyond personal feelings and how great it was to maybe be participating and playing golf like that? Did you have any thought in your mind at all on what these little things would ultimately mean and lead to golf industry at large?
No, that was so far beyond where I could even think about it in the moment. I really wasn't thinking about a whole lot of people like me playing golf. As a matter of fact, I missed out on a lot of the experience with Palmer, just not having the knowledge of the game. And I knew about Mr. Palmer and had watched some tournaments that he played golf in. And of course, all those guys, Nicholas, and knew about all those people. But not being a golfer, it wasn't the top of my thought process. And I didn't really realize that impact in the beginning, just too much to wrap your head around. It was just a nice, fun experience. It was a good time. He was a very congenial person all day. A lot of people probably wouldn't have done that. I don't know. But that was the first experience. Then subsequent years, next year I went back, played with Owner, played with Gary Player, played with Chichi, played with Trevino in subsequent years. So that's how all of that process started. And then in the meantime, when I went back from Arnold Palmer, the one tip he gave me, remember, I told you I was playing this in this high rider exactly as it was designed. And it has 3.5-inch, 9-inch diameter tires on the front. And Palmer said to me, he said, you need to figure out how to put bigger tires on your chair. And said, it's okay in Florida. These greens are really hard. But he said, there's some places in the country where those tires are going to leave an impression on the green, and that won't be good.
Yeah.
And he said, you need to figure that out. I said, well, Mr. Palmer, you don't understand. I said, I use this chair all day, and it's 22.5 inches wide, so I can fit in the environment that doesn't fit my wheelchair.
Right.
And for me to put bigger tires on this chair would take all of that away, so I could play golf maybe once every 2 or 3 months, and I would lose all day, every day, the chair. That's not a good trade-off. See, I'm building this as trade-offs. What do I gain and what do I lose?
Right.
And so I said, that's not a good trade-off, but when I get home, I'll do. So that was his one tip for me, was to get bigger tires for the front of my wheelchair.
It's interesting. I mean, golf industry, and he was around golf courses, and I just think it's fascinating that it doesn't surprise me how genuine he was based on everything I've read and understand about Arnold Palmer and how, but it also even less that he keyed right in on the relationship between the vehicle and the golf course as far as tires and what that actually would mean to the vehicle being accepted and which 2026 is seemingly still not resolved in some circles, Tom, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I couldn't find it, and I want to mention this to you just on this particular call, because I would love to get a copy of it at some point. But I understand in 1998 by Leslie Stallings, and we don't have to go through the whole interview, but I'd love to get a copy of that right now. But I guess she gets me off. I mean, I'm just curious. You're a pretty famous guy, Tom. I mean, I'm famous, but I didn't realize you were this famous.
Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of that. I have copies of my People Magazine article, my Golf Week, my Business Week, my Time Magazine. I got all of that stuff. I got lots of major newspaper articles from all over the country. I got all of that stuff. Unfortunately, the copy of me and Leslie Stahl got lost in the transition somewheres.
I'm gonna hit on.
They spent 2 in Texas with me.
My good. Well, I'm gonna have to get on the phone and I'm gonna find somebody at CBS that knows somebody. So we're gonna see if we can find us a copy of that somewhere. But let's talk about now you went from playing golf at some point in '89. You went playing golf and beyond golfers, everybody on the planet that plays golf would have loved to have at least just seen play, much less met and played with. That's pretty remarkable. Timing is everything, and that's some great timing. I'm not sure if it was all for the right reasons, but evidently it probably was all for the right reasons because here we go. But in the early, you've been plow, you're getting pretty familiar with what's going on. You played, gosh, more than 600 courses in 49 states. What motivated you to do that? Was there post 80 just helping educate the golf industry? Was this just something you felt like you wanted to do on a personal level, but also knew that the downstream benefits, you're going to help golf courses understand what's possible so that other individuals in your situation could benefit from the game?
So let me take a step back for just a minute. You may or may not know this part of this story. So when I came back from Puerto Rico or from Miami to Palmer, I was playing at a golf course and a lady came up to me and introduced herself, Marcia Bailey. She says, I want to teach disabled people to play golf. Didn't have anybody in a wheelchair. She had seniors, arthritic people, amputees, that sort of wheelchair. I'd love for you to come and be part of my program. So I did and began to, in the end, the two of us really ran this program after about 5 or 6 years. But what happened was we would go out and solicit money to run the program because nobody had to pay money to come and take these lessons. It was all provided free. Her idea was people to play golf and get them out on the golf course. She had a beginner, an intermediate, and an advanced group. And once they got to the advanced group, and each group had to meet a certain criteria of how far you hit the ball, this, that. And once you do those things, you could move into the next level and start learning more things. So she didn't try to lump it all into one. Start here early, and when you get that down, we'll move up here and we'll move to the next level, and then we'll move to the next level. And so in one of our encounters out looking for money, we went to the city of Lakewood, and all these cities had little slush funds, and they'd give us money because people from their community participated in our program. And these guys said, we're for city. We have a Corps of Engineer 100-year lease on a piece of property that we want to build a golf course on. We're having a little trouble with the Corps giving us a permit for the golf course, but we're going to keep working on it. In the meantime, they'd hired a superintendent and were moving forward and decided that they were interested in this disabled golf and what it would take in their golf course to be accessible. Because the ADA said that along with all these buildings that needed to be accessible, where you have physical guidelines, they dropped it right in the middle of that. They didn't say golf course clubhouse. They just said golf course, but they provided no guidelines. So we thought it would be good to figure out what guidelines would be an accessible golf course, not a pancake golf course, but really, truly what would work So we put together a little group forum, a group of people, again, compromised from all facets. We had a golf course architect from Colorado, Dick Phelps. We had Marcia Bailey and her husband, PGA. So we had the PGA people here. We had an owner, the city of Lakewood. We had the superintendent that they had already hired. And we had the executive director of the Colorado Golf Association participating from a rules kind of point of view. Was represented in this little forum about input from what would make an accessible golf course. In the meantime, Mr. Tolson and myself began to play golf around the city and the county at all these golf courses, and we'd come document the things we ran into and what we thought the solution would be. We'd come back to our forum. We'd say, here's what we ran to. Here's our solution. Does that work for you, the architect, you, the owner, etc.? So we went through that process for about a year. We came up with a pretty good idea about what was going on. In the meantime, the city of Lakewood did get their permit from the Corps to build their golf course. They said, we're going to adapt these guidelines into our golf course. They went to the architect, asked him to make changes. They went to the contractor. The contractor said, no problem. We'll do that, all these little changes. So then at the end of that, we have a pretty good idea about what an accessible golf course would look like, but didn't know what to do with this nice document we made. It wasn't long after that I got a call from a person, Larry Allen from Clemson University. He introduced himself. In the meantime, we'd had a couple articles written in the PGA magazine about what we were doing. Jim Bailey got that done. He said, I read what you're doing. He said, we're getting ready to build a golf course at Clemson, and we're very interested in this. And could you? I said, well, as a matter of fact, we're all done. We don't know what to do with it. I'll just send it all to you. Well, I packaged it up. I sent it to him. About a month later, I got a call from Mr. Allen. He said, we're going to for accessible golf. We're going to adopt this concept of inviting everybody to come, and we're going to work this out and make it. And we had our initial meeting, the National Forum for Accessible Golf in Hilton Head, South Carolina, which is where I first met Gary Robb from Indiana, National Center on Accessibility, Jerry Heitzusen from University of Missouri, and Larry. And of course, all these people showed up. And that's where we began. Well, this process, again, the same idea of having input from everybody. And as a matter of fact, my great friend Mike, all businesses in 1990 that got signed were shaking in their boots. What is this business? What are we going to have to change? But they want to know what's going on. So the first meeting was a little shaky, but as years went on, he became the biggest advocate that you could ever have for this process.
Well, as Mike is on my bed, as you also know, Mike lives here in Charleston, South Carolina. And to your point, Mike is an amazing advocate for accessible golf now. And I think it's really interesting that I'm certainly familiar with the forums they have, because that kind of, our organization was kind of that downstream after those things got
happened too. I'll finish this story.
Yeah.
So this went on for the end of 10 years. We got it all ready. So now to go off to the National Access Board and out for public review. Okay, a few changes. Okay, we can do this. Okay, off to the deal. So yeah, we can adapt this as the guidelines. At the end of that, about 11 or 12-year process, around the year 2001, now everybody, all these participants, it's been away out of the hundreds of people that went there. And not that this is important, doesn't make any difference, but it's a reality. Of the hundreds of people that participated over this 10 or 11 years, I was the only guy there that did all of that on my own dime. Everybody else that came there had a job. They were being paid to be there. Their expenses were paid to get there and stay there and get back home. I was the only guy in that hundreds of people that participated that did all of that on my own dime. So not that I care, it was something that was important to me to do this because of how I feel about what this thing holds for disabilities, which we still haven't realized fully yet. But at the end of that, we said, okay, now what are we going to do? We've been doing this for 10 or 11 years. What are we going to do? So the National Alliance for Accessible Golf is formed right here. So we say, okay, so we're going to form a board of directors. We're going to use this as education, as a clearinghouse, answer people's questions, be here to people move this whole program forward. And again, a representative from all the sanctioning bodies of golf and myself, I was on the founding member of that board. Actually, on the executive board is the treasurer for a year. So I was a part of the very beginning of the National Alliance for Accessible Golf. For the next 8 years, I sat on that board before I began on the advisory board. So that's the history of where the Alliance came from and how it really got started. It was the end of the National Forum for Accessible Golf and saying, where do we go from here? So that's how that all came together.
Yeah, well, definitely appreciate the connecting, sir. We've got those, we've got actually on our website, there's some good history in there. With the exception of the one is hard to find. We've got forums 2 through 6, but I've had trouble finding a copy of Forum 1, but we'll get there. So again, so back to playing golf. You were playing all over the country after these things kind of after the access. If you can encapsulate one or two consistent that you saw at that time playing golf, what were those days out there and trying to wake up the golf and what was needed to be?
So what allowed me to do this, and I'll answer that question, but what allowed me to do this was I was traveling around the country going to rehab hospitals and VA centers, marketing the
Mm-hmm.
products that I manufactured. And that's what got me traveling. And as I traveled, I would then play golf when I was in a state or a city or
Right.
whatever. The 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 very early on, and sometimes still, was two main topics: damage to my course and slow play. Those were the two perceptions right away that everybody had instantly. Was God, it's going to take all day to play, and you're going to tear up my greens. So that was the initial thing. I had to go out in the beginning, and even after the ADA, in direct violation of what the ADA specifically says to people, the superintendent would come and say, "Can you come drive on my practice green?" Now I could have said, "You asked everybody to walk on the green to see if they pick up their feet or anything." No. Well, then you really can't ask me to roll on the green because you're treating me different from everybody else, which the ADA says you really can't do. Now, I never did do that because that's just starting hostility that probably doesn't need to be there. Knowing I'm not going to hurt their green, I had no problem with going out there and walking on a green for them, making a couple of putts and helping them see that their golf course. So that was the two biggest things always, being a big one and damage to the green. I think that I played a key role in helping a lot of people get past that perception. In the
Yeah,
industry.
I would agree. I can and I pretty routinely I say often line with what I know. There are plenty of golf out there that are getting it right today, and there are certainly a lot today than there would be without there not been S for sure. However, there's a lot of in the country, and there are still plenty that I would like to say are not getting it right versus say getting it wrong. They've got for improvement because even now here in 2026, we get a lot of calls and emails. And to your point earlier, you've done always having a very balanced approach with respect to understanding that okay, the sad reality is the golfer has to be the educator, and that really shouldn't. The person playing golf is has to be the always two sides to the story, no matter what. Not necessarily one side's wrong, the other side's right, but there's always two versions. Both. We hear golf course operators who are being asked to do things, don't understand if they have to, if it's the law or what they should do. Conversely, we get a lot of calls from golfers who are saying course X, course Y, course Z, not let play at certain times or whatever. And I tell you, the recurring theme in all these scenarios when solutions usually happen is when those people can simply get in a room and have a really good conversation about understanding what each party's trying to do, right? Because I think the goal is to get people playing golf, and I think it's a lack of communication usually is what results in things getting elevated to another level, which unfortunately, thankfully, not super often involves calls from lawyers or this or threats and stuff like that. But I do think that we hear enough stories where you know that facilities and professionals and superintendents still need to be educated, and there's nothing wrong with that because people come into the business, they're new, they're uninformed sometimes. But ultimately, you would hope that people would catch up with the requirements to provide access to anybody that's gone. Don't fight it. Don't fight. And so you've been for a long time, and you've had some defining career. We're going to obviously the stuff you were before the day was related, the stuff for the national forums on accessible golf. I think the DOJ recognized you as a much admired golf industry advocate. Regulatory negotiation committees for the U.S. Access Board. I know recently, I believe at the first U.S. Adaptive Open, the USGA made a mention of you, highlighted you as a legacy figure for the amazing work that you've done. And so you've been in your work. I mean, if you look back at your career now, with the exception of talking about the number of times you've shot your age, which we're going to talk about, because I know you tell me this all the time. Of those moments, Tom, what give you two the most proud of that has you at this can look back on just some truly fantastic things that you've done for not only yourself, but for the game of golf?
Well, I think to myself, think about this kind of stuff very often because I don't think about me. But
That's why I know every now and then I would love to hear because I can list them out from you what you're really proud of.
I consider myself the ambassador, the ambassador of devices that I've tried to eat without them angry or leaving them with a bad in their mouth. But I've had that I didn't want to, uh, but getting controversial just makes it harder for the next guy that comes along. And so I've really tried to, by an example, show people that we can play golf. We share playing golf. We are not going to tear up their golf course. We're not going to hold up their play where everything's backed up because I'm out there. And so the next time someone behind me, they're going to welcome them with open arms rather than we had one of them. We don't want any more of that. We had some people doing that. Richard Thiesing suing golf, stupid stuff, just trying to pick up 10 grand because it was cheaper than hiring a lawyer to fight it. So I really like to consider like I've been an ambassador in that sense to make life easier for those that come behind me. And being the first guy out there, it was tough, I have to say. And just a quick story. I don't know if Jerry Heitsusan or not. He participated in this from the University of Missouri. He had a big program, recreational therapy program. And we were having a big thing up in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. And because he brought all these people in, the mayor would always make the city open to it. So we're at the Lake Geneva Country Club. And for all the first years in the forum, when we're having our forum and we're talking about this stuff and we're talking about people getting on the golf course, I keep trying to tell them, when you get controversial you can't get front desk without controversy, you can't have a good day of golf. You're out there all day saying, what the hell are they thinking about? I should have said this. They should have done that. You can't get it out if you just walk away from that and disappear. No, it's bothering you all day long. So it's really hard to play golf. Well, I've tried to relay that to these people in these forum meetings over and over, meeting after meeting. So in this particular case, they're not going to let me play at the Lake Geneva Country Club. And Jerry Heitsusan says, I'll take care of that. He goes in there and he comes out. I did get to play, but he's so mad because of the controversy he had to go through at the counter there. He had probably had the worst day of golf in his life. And I said, okay, so multiply that by about 500 times. What I've been through every golf course I've gone to for the first 10 years of this, the first 10 years. I used to go with Marcia Bailey to play golf in Colorado, an LPGA master, played on tour in the 70s. Her and her husband had run most of the golf courses in the city, had mentored many there that they, including Betsy Clark was one of the. So we were a pro that they had mentored would take her over to the side of the thing and say, is he really going to play golf here? And she says, well, yeah, that's what we came for. So, I mean, he had a problem getting us with they mentored. So the first 10 years, it was everywhere. Just superintendents had come charging out. What the hell you doing out here? So, well, I'm playing golf. What does it look like I'm doing?
It's not funny, but I got to laugh at the way you're telling the story. I mean,
it's true. You'll have an enjoyable day. You get in that fight and you're really forcing your way. And after the ADA, I could say, look, you probably don't want to do this because you're going to wind up in the federal court someday. Maybe not today, but you keep it up, you're going to be down at the federal courthouse defending yourself because ADA says you can't do this. And when you have to go to the tee box, boy, it's tough. So
I can see that. And I don't have statistics to prove this. What I've heard in my career and heard in this particular position, I think more times than not, that finds itself trouble. I hate the trouble, but situation where it's going beyond having a conversation and making something happen usually has to do with, they had regarding providing access and barrier-free environments to title that may be. Instead of that as kind of a notification when they weren't able to do in developing a plan and solving it and moving forward to prevent it from happening again, no action was taken. It's like, this problem is nothing. Realized it's not a away. These are individuals who have a right to play golf. Okay, and there's a obligation in the law to provide to the goods and services you provide. So, and part of that, same you're playing, we're a big believer in, right? I mean, I heard that uh, that was separate. I know. Listen, we've talked a lot over the years here and there. I know the term adaptive golf is not necessarily your favorite word. It's more of a community, I think, and that kind of ship has sailed as you because it means a lot to a lot of the community. But to your credit, and I steal your word sometimes, golfers, these are okay. They play golf a different way sometimes because that's what they're required to do because of whatever impairment they may have. But in the end, they're still on the course with golf clubs and with a golf ball, which therefore makes them a golfer. So, what you kind of close with that? I know that you don't love, but you understand it's just the way it is now. But I'm always curious about that one.
Well, I think what I do is expand that community. You see, forever we've created this little group around ourselves here that we play our own game with our own rules with people just like ourselves. And golf for me was a chance to do that, expand your horizons. Golf has a handicap with bunkers not being settled yet. You give me my 20 handicap that I currently have, and I'll go play with any pro and be competitive with them. If I shoot an 80 something and have a 20 handicap, they're going to have a hard time keeping up with me. So, I mean, it's a game to be with other people, and you get to share some things outside of community. When you get out of that community and you start playing golf with doctors and lawyers and Indian chiefs and ditch diggers and truck drivers and people from all walks of life, and you're out there for 4 hours with them. I've played golf with people from every politicians to truck drivers to laborers to whoever. And you get to be with people that you don't ever get to be around. You don't float in those circles sometimes, but you got 4 hours with people sharing ideas and talking and doing things. And that's just an experience that I'm people don't strive to get to. And when we do this adaptive stuff in own tournaments and we keep ourselves in our own group, and then all the rest of society, you got to realize we're this very small part of that community. They're looking at us and say, boy, it's amazing what those people can do. Look at them. Look what they can do. When I play, I'm not one of those people. I'm one of the people. And that's just an experience that I'm more people don't strive. Friend Marcia Bailey, that was her thing. She was going to teach people to play golf. When they get to a certain point in her advanced class, she went and played 9 holes of golf with them. And she says, go have a nice life. Enjoy golf, play with your friends, play with your family. Her whole idea was exactly that. We're going to teach you how to play this game and then go play it. And it's just sad that all these people are so confined in the community when that community could be much larger and people could have so much more enjoyment than they're having. They can't even imagine that enjoyment. I mean, it just we've played all over the country. We've been on the RTJ Golf Trail many times already, and other places. The experience we have, people interact with when you just can't put it
in words. Amazing, which really resonates, and I appreciate the way that obviously I mentioned Susan. I call her Sue. I want to presume that I'm allowed to call her Sue, but Susan Dyes, your partner of many years who's played golf with you. I'm sure that y'all get your fair amount of rounds in, and I think how many rounds a week are you? Others good, by the way.
Well, we've been real busy here this spring, so I haven't played for a little bit, but we normally get a couple rounds a weekend.
Excellent, excellent. I know I was lucky enough to get in with y'all probably close to 3 years ago. So
Yeah,
you gotta let me know when you get back up to Charleston because I know you catch up with Mike Tinky every now and then. And
if I could putt better, I could keep up with you almost.
well, yeah, I don't know about that. All is good, but yes, it's been great talking with you today, Tom. I like to wrap it up with a few kind of rapid fire questions, and we'll get answer if you get any more parting shots against. But favorite golf course, pick one and why.
Well, that's so hard for me because you have to understand. I've played at some of the country. I've played at Pebble Beach. I've played at Torrey Pines. I've played at all 5 courses in the Doral complex, all 5 of them, many times over. TPC Sawgrass, TPC Scottsdale, both the TPCs and TPC Hartford, both TCPs in Vero Beach, uh, Minnetonka Country Club right after Corey Pavin won. And I played that when he was done. I played Congressional in D.C. when after Tom Wyckoff won the Senior Open there. And I mean, I played such awesome golf courses. It's a favorite.
I like the fact that because this has been the easiest interview. I had to turn the screen on it, so I really appreciate it. I have to ask you this one. Then we kind of one last serious question. We'll wrap up with it. How many times have you shot your age?
Twice. Once was 81, and once now when I'm 84. Both on a par 72 golf course playing around 5,000 yards, which is the yardage I try to play.
Do you think it gets easier or harder to shoot your age as each year progresses?
Yeah, it's getting harder actually. It's
Yeah, that's still pretty.
it's
I love that statistic you've shot. It is a great story for me because I think anybody that does that is on a good list of people.
and I play with a group of people in Stone Harbor, New Jersey when I'm there in the summer of about 50 people, and I've won that club championship twice.
That's very impressive. Well, let's just close with this. I'll let you wrap it up here. I don't have any more questions for you. I mean, I've got I wouldn't get through stuff you've done in your career, but if you had to, as a person that's years old now, you and behind us, what is it that you hope that they would, the game of golf if they have a disability and able to find? I mean, you touched on it earlier with just playing off as the golfer, not those people. But just any closing thoughts on that particular matter?
Well, what golf does than just the same game by the same rules is people with disabilities uh, don't necessarily feel comfortable interacting with able-bodied people, don't feel comfortable interacting with us in a related time. But just to highlight that, the reason I got on 60 Minutes was Leslie Stahl asked me if I knew why she was there. And I said, no, I don't. And she said, well, I was at a black tie dinner in D.C. and an old friend of mine that was in a wheelchair didn't know she was in a wheelchair. And she said, when I went to talk to her, it was so uncomfortable, me being here and her being there. She said, I stooped down in my tight dress with high heels, and that was so uncomfortable, I couldn't keep it up. And so I just finished the conversation and left. And she said, I went back to my office and says, doesn't somebody make a wheelchair that stands up? So she was experiencing that difficulty of communication between here and here. And golf is that thing where everybody there in this group has a goal in mind. You're all there doing the same thing, getting the ball in that little hole down there. And while you're out there, all those barriers fall down. You live with and socialize with and feel comfortable with, not an uncomfortableness of being there. And that's the most wonderful thing about golf is the fact that not only you're competing with, you're really competing with yourself, but you find yourself, hey, listen, I can do this as good as the next guy. What a boost for me. I outdrive a lot of people once in a while, just right. I said, boy, you're going to have a hard time telling people you got outdrove by a cripple. And they always say, we don't see no cripple here. That's their response, without exception. So,
Oh man,
see, all those barriers, golf course, and disabled people have no real venue to do that, where they interact with able-bodied people, stranger able-bodied people. There's no venue for that. While you're having a great time, everybody's having a good time, and to me that really expands your horizons. If you're just like, wow, I do this, I can do anything. It really begins to expand your horizons. Then you begin to feel more comfortable going out and encountering strangers or even work associates or anything. All of those barriers begin to disappear because of your interaction on the golf course. And that's the biggest thing that we're missing out on. That's the problem with adaptive and community crap, is that we keep missing out on that wonderful opportunity because we're just this way, and it's easy to do it this way, and we can raise money for these poor people. If they're out doing what everybody else is doing, it's going to be hard to raise money to support that. Let them pay for it by themselves. They're not poor and downtrodden here. I mean, I don't understand the whole motivation there, obviously. Besides, I did all of wheelchair basketball and adaptive. I lived in Colorado. In the beginning, I went and did all that stuff, and it was very limited compared to what I do now. It was so limiting, it's just hard to think about. And golf just opened that up. Once I got into it, I didn't start thinking that way. that thought process evolved as I began to play and began to realize what was really happening, and the interaction I was having with others, that I, even in a work environment, even though I had my own business, I had employees there, but I wasn't out socializing afterward. It just, I got story after story about that and how that. I got a marketing video award in Hollywood from the deal, like an Emmy for marketing, and there were several movie stars and all that stuff at this, and several people in a wheelchair. And you know what? Had somebody with them that was pushing them around. They'd go get their meal off the high table over here for them. And one by one, they went over and one parked here, and another one came over and parked, another one parked. Before long, about half an hour in, they formed their own circle with their back to these hundreds of people that's in here, standing up and having their cocktails and visiting and going around. But they've gotten their own little group just subconsciously, because that's what we do, talking to themselves about what they're dealing with, while
Right.
this whole party's going on around them. And so what was I doing? I was standing up. I got a letter back from Pat Boone and some other people that I encountered there. So I'm standing up, walking around the room, talking to food off the high table and just interacting. Well, golf helped me get into that feeling of do that and the comfortableness to do that, because I had experience at it. You see, there's no place for us to experience those things.
You wanted to be part of the party,
Yeah.
not in some other room associated with the party. And Tom, I really enjoyed speaking with you today, and it's my pleasure. And if golf was a party, and it means and included in doing things, keeps people happy and helps people live longer, and does that. And I think sage advice and some really, really powerful, someone who's been in the trenches for a long time. So thank you for talking with me today, but more importantly, thank you for years of effort that you've put into this. Um, I'm not sure I can give you any strokes aside right now. When I'm playing, we might have to play straight up, and I might have to hope for the best. But I'll look forward to the next time you visit Charleston, and please pass along my best to Susan, who may be in the room, for letting you hang out with us for a while, because I know she's a
She's
big
right
part
over
of your
there.
journey
Yeah.
as well. Hi, Susan. Thank you so much for letting Tom come out and play today. We appreciate it. And Tom, on that note, I'll catch you later.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom.